This month I've bought a new chair, a shit ton of card games, caught up on all the MCU stuff from the last year, I'm really fucking tired, and I've made a load of notes to hopefully keep me on track. So let's just get into it. So I bought a chair. It's from Secret Labs. I was looking at getting a new chair for quite a while. Originally I wanted to get one of the Razer Iska chairs. For one thing, it would be in keeping with all of my other Razer things. And for another, I wanted a new chair because I get a lot of pain. And I was hoping a new chair would help fix that. So I looked at getting one of the Razer chairs for a while, and they only had them in leather. And I don't like leather chairs, I wanted a cloth chair. So I spent a bit more time looking, I looked at Noble chairs and Secret Labs, and ended up going with Secret Labs, because it sounded like a good choice. Like everyone else seemed to think it was a pretty good chair, so I got one, and it's okay. It's not that good, especially for the cost. It hasn't helped my pain in the slightest. It's also, like, incredibly firm. It's an incredibly firm chair. Feels like I'm sat on a brick. I wouldn't say it was comfortable. It's got this, like, lumbar support thing in the back with, like, 2 dials that you, like, twist to move it. But you also can't move it while you're sat in it, which I think is kind of stupid. Because you just kind of have to, like, spin them until it gets in the right position, but because you can't sit in it, you can't tell if it's the right position, so you have to, like, move it, then check if it's right. If it's not, move it again, then check if it's right, and do that over and over again. One of the issues with it is that it's just really fucking loud. Apparently, it's a fault with this chair, and they said they're going to fix it, but I don't know how. Like, it squeaks constantly. The lumbar support system that I'm talking about just squeaks constantly. If you leave it for a day, 2 days in the same position, it starts to squeak when you sit on it. So you have to move it, and then it'll stop, but then after a day or two, it'll just start squeaking again. The arms are really annoying. So they move in like 4 different ways. They move in and out, up and down. They like rotate, and they also move like in and out again. But the last time you have to like actually unscrew them from the base and like slide them out and then screw them back in again. The issue being for me that even at the closest in, they're still too far out. So they are very far apart for me. Like, I'm not particularly wide, and this is it's the correct size chair for me. But it's so wide. I constantly feel like I'm like a bird. Got my arms like spread all the fucking time. It's also a very high chair. Like, at its lowest, it is higher than my old chair was. And it means that I can either have it at its lowest, in which case the armrests don't go up to my desk, or I can have it at its highest, in which case the armrests will fit the desk, but my feet don't touch the floor. When the armrests move up and down, if I have them at their highest, which would bring it about in line with my desk, it puts an incredible amount of pressure on your shoulders. It just feels like you're like hunched, like shrugging the entire time. It's really uncomfortable. It's just very much not worth it. Like, I spent like £400 on this chair, and I'm just like, my old chair was 140, I think, and it is not 2.5 times better than that chair. So I don't feel like it's worth the money. One last thing about the arms. If you are sat, like, right up to your desk, the way you're supposed to sit, if you sit that close to your desk, and keep your back to the back of the chair, my elbows fall off the armrests, because there is a gap of about 2 inches between the armrests and the back of the chair, so my arms just fall off, and it's really uncomfortable. There is no position I can get in with this chair where I am comfortable at all times. I'm always a little bit uncomfortable. It's very much not worth the money. And you know what the worst part about all this is? A week after I bought it, literally a week, they released a Razer Iska in cloth. So, it's just bad for me all around. You may notice that I'm trying to go quite quickly. As I mentioned at the start, for one thing, I'm quite tired. For another, I just have a shit ton of things to go through. I've got the notes to try and keep me on track, but even then I feel like I'm going to go too long. Right, to give you some idea, I've like laid it out into sections. If I go 5 minutes on every section, that's going to be an hour and a half. And that's if I keep to just all the sections and just all the notes. And I'm already not doing that because I'm just like sitting here explaining this right now. Anyway, so the next main thing that I did... Actually, no, let's not do it in order. Because I think I've got less to say on the other bit, so I'll do that first. I caught up on all of the Marvel things from the last year. And I'm going to briefly go over each of them. I don't have much to say on all of them, but I have like some general thoughts. And I will say that some of them are very clearly better than others, but I think they're all okay at worst. I don't think any of them are bad. They're just not all that great. Some of them are pretty good. So to start with, I watched all of Wandavision. I really liked Wandavision. I was like a big fan of the presentation. I was particularly a fan of how they used, as they moved through time in the in-series TV series, they changed things like the colour and the aspect ratio and things like that, and I really liked that. I also like that they used the different aspect ratio to distinguish like where they were in the world, not just like in time, but also like if you're in the WandaVision TV show, the aspect ratio was different than if you're in the real world, and I just liked that. I thought it was kind of cool. It was a pretty good story. I would have liked it if... This is actually an issue I've got with all Disney shows, not specifically WandaVision. I don't like that they're inconsistent lengths. I kind of get it, because if a story needs to be told in that amount of time, that's how long it takes. It doesn't matter if you're like supposed to, and I suppose it kind of ends up working better that way, but it feels a little bit strange. Besides that, though, I think it's a pretty good show. Like, I liked it. I like that kind of have a new Vision now. We have like an actual Vision. Vision's just back. That was kind of unexpected, but okay. And Scarlet Witch is actually Scarlet Witch now, so that's kind of cool. It was a good show. Oh, and what's it got powers, didn't she? I can't remember what she's called. Sorry, I'm so bad with names. The daughter of the woman who is friends with Captain Marvel. She has powers now. Don't know what they are, but she does have them. Seems to, like, absorb energy or some shit. I don't know. It was pretty cool. It'll be interesting to see where all of this goes. What did I watch next? Next was Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I enjoyed this. I thought it was pretty good. I felt that the pacing was a tad strange. The timings between things felt strange. Like, sometimes, like, they'd have a conversation and then immediately be off somewhere. And other times you'd think they were trying to do something quickly and then they'd take, like, a massive detour. Particularly the penultimate episode. In terms of the characters, it could not have come at any other time. It was, like, the most important time for the character to develop in that moment. The penultimate episode is essentially, like, the Falcon coming to terms with, like, Captain America's death and, like, deciding to, like, take up their legacy and, like, fight as the new Captain America. So it couldn't have come at any other time in the story. But we know that this group are planning a massive terrorist attack, and then Bucky and the Falcon... God, I'm really bad with names. They just leave and go and repair a boat. And it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't feel like a decision that a hero would make. To some extent, like, character-wise, that's kind of the point. He feels like he's not. He feels like he kind of wants to give it up, and he feels like the world doesn't deserve to be saved, I think is kind of the point. But at the same time, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the right thing to do at that moment when you know people are planning a massive terrorist attack to just go off and build a boat. But again, in terms of character, it couldn't have happened any other way, because if he didn't do that, the entire rest of the story wouldn't happen. I get it. It feels like the story is told in a way that doesn't flow very well, but couldn't have worked any other way, so it kind of lets it down. I also very much don't like Falcon's new suit. I don't like all the white. I just don't think it looks very good. It also looks weirdly bulky, especially like around his shoulders. It's like the cowl attached to his neck. Attached to his shoulders, or is that just in my head? But either way, like, the shoulder bit is very white, and it looks very blocky, and I'm not a big fan of that. His old suit was, like, much more... I can't think how to describe it. It looks like a lot more maneuverable, whereas this looks bulky and looks like it'd be hard to move in. I mean, clearly, from the show, it isn't, but it looks like it would be. I also like that Baron Zemo came back. I just like Baron Zemo. He's kind of cool. Like, he's an interesting villain. And it was nice seeing him, like, spend half the series just, like, helping them. Kind of being a bit of a dick at the same time, but, like, actually being helpful. It was nice. It was just fun to spend time with him. US agent got introduced. I don't know much about him. I just know he was a thing that existed. And this is is this the first time we see Val? I think it's the first time we see Val. It's not the first time in... No, yeah, it is. It will be the first time in the timeline, wouldn't it? I suppose it doesn't get specifically dated. She comes up in a later piece of content which technically takes place before this, but came out after, but might take place at the same time, because the specific scene I'm referencing isn't dated, like, whatever. So I was talking to someone about this, and I was like, I don't know, are they setting up, like, what they call it, like, the Dark Avengers or some shit? I don't know. I don't really do comics, I just kind of like the films. But anyway, next, Loki. I thought Loki was really good, but it is very clearly disconnected from everything else. What I mean by that is that the ending of the series would have massive ramifications for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, but doesn't feel like it's going to get explored at all, except within the Loki series. Because they essentially, at the end of the series, create a massive time war. Like there is a multiverse war throughout time, and I feel like that would have like massive ramifications. As I've already said, I feel like that would have a huge impact on all of time. But we're only going to see it in Loki. I also thought it was a little bit strange. Well, not strange insofar as, like... It's strange in that I don't think it works from a character perspective, but I understand why they did it from a, like, overarching narrative sense, kind of. In that Loki did all of Loki's progression. So, this Loki is not the film Loki, because film Loki's dead. Except, basically, this Loki has taken all of that Loki's character progression and done it in the space of about 2 weeks. He feels like the same Loki who died in the films, despite the fact that he is an earlier Loki who hadn't gone through the same journey and thus would still be kind of evil. It feels like if they just slot him back in, he'll just slide in perfectly and everything will go back to the same as it was. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like it should have happened, at least not to the same extent. Also, Alligator Loki is the best. I don't think there would be much argument about that. It's an alligator. After that was What If. What If is probably the worst. And that's not to say it's, like, bad, it just basically doesn't matter. It's a lot of, like, animated stories that tell, like, what might have happened if something else changed, hence the name of What If. The issue being with that is that, like, doesn't really end up mattering at all. It's a kind of, like, fun little thought experiment kind of thing. It's, like, interesting to see what would have happened, but that's like as far as it goes. Like, they couldn't go any further with this unless they made it all canon in a multiverse sense, but they haven't done that yet, and I don't see them doing that with this. So, and the other thing is that, like, some of the episodes don't really have a climax, don't really end, they just sort of stop. Like, specifically the zombies episode, they, like, have a fight, then fly off in a jet and say, we're gonna fix it. And then the narrator comes in and goes, but maybe they can't fix it, and then it just stops. There are a couple like that, where it just sort of, like, tells a story and then stops, and it doesn't feel like you reached the climax, it just feels like they ran out of budget, or, like, they ran out of time and just had to finish there. The ones that did stop well were the Doctor Strange one, that ends really well, and the, what is she called, Captain Carter, I think? I'm going to say that and just hope that I'm right. That one ends well, because it essentially re-merges with the existing film timeline. And, like, you can just presume that everything occurred the same from that point onwards. But yeah, it's, like, it's worth watching. It's nothing particularly special, and, like I say, like, it's going to have no long-lasting ramifications, so, but it was fine. I watched all of these, and then just after I finished watching all of them, I was like, I wonder if Black Widow was still in the cinema, and checked. And it turned out that it was on the day after at like 12:30, and that was the only showing. And I was like, I guess I'll have to go tomorrow. I said tomorrow would have been the day after at this point, wouldn't it? But anyway, it is around the same time. It just so happened that I was very nearly at the end of Heavensward on my streams. So I decided to take the Friday off, move one of my streams, and go to the cinema. And then, on the Thursday, I just finished Heavensward. So I didn't need to rearrange my stream, I just got the day off. So, what we did was we went and we watched Black Widow, and then immediately after watched Shang Chi. So with Black Widow, it's a fine film, it's not great, and it has basically no stakes. You know what happens to Black Widow because the film takes place in 2016, and you know everything that happens after that in terms of the film, so that has basically no stakes. I suppose stuff could have happened with the other characters, but every other character was newly introduced in that film, so I would basically have felt very little if any of them had like died or anything. So the one character we already have an emotional connection to is basically immune from danger, and all the other characters mean very little to us. You also, like, the big threat. You go in under the impression that the Red Room doesn't exist, then find out that the Red Room exists, and by the end of the film, the Red Room no longer exists. So basically, nothing changed. Like, if you don't see this film, the only thing that matters is that one character got introduced. That's basically the only thing that matters from this entire film, is that one new character got introduced. I completely understand why it exists, but it doesn't really feel like it needed to. It feels a kind of unnecessary. I feel like almost this would have worked better as one of the TV series if they'd have made it more of a spy thing than the sort of like normal action-y film that it is, and made it a little bit longer and worked it as a TV series. I feel like that would have been better. Also, the entire final act is basically just one after another series of Deus Ex Machina, and it's not really, because it turns out it was all the plan, but it's all like stages of a plan that were hidden from the viewer, and it just does it like, how many times? 1, 2, 3? At least 3 times in a row. Like, it does something, and then immediately resolves the conflict by saying, oh, this was actually part of the plan, and then does it again, and then does it again. It's just kind of odd. It's not that the film's bad. It just does a lot of weird things right at the end, like I was just saying, and doesn't really feel like it needed to exist, because it sort of sets up a threat that would be a big deal, and immediately resolves it within one film. Because of where it's placed, you already know going in that it wasn't a big deal. So it feels like essentially nothing happened. It's like kind of a shame. I feel like if anything, if this had come out when the film takes place, basically none of my complaints would matter. But because it came out now, it feels kind of irrelevant. And like I say, all it really did was set up one new character, and she's a good character. I would be perfectly happy to see more of her. And also, this is where Val comes back, who I was talking about earlier. She's a good character, and I'm interested to see more of her, but that's the only thing we really got from this. Oh, and Taskmaster, who is fine. They don't get shown off very well, which is a shame. They're not that interesting, which is also a shame. I quite like Taskmaster. I've always thought Taskmaster was kind of cool, but in this, they're just okay. Like, nothing particularly amazing. Yeah, the film's fine, it just, I don't know, kind of feels like it didn't need to exist. You lose nothing from it, but don't really feel like you're going to gain a whole lot either. And then, finally, we get Shang Chi. Shang Chi is probably the best of the things that I've just talked about. It does still suffer from some of the Marvel stuff of, like, they always, like, act quite similarly when they're introducing a character. Like, when they introduce, like, Iron Man or introduce Hulk and all that sort of stuff, they all, like, feel kind of similar, those first films, and it feels kind of like that again. It's good, though. The fight scenes in it are really good. My only issue with those being that the first one in the film is the best one. The one on the bus, which, I'm not sure if it's actually, it wouldn't actually be the first film. It's not the first fight scene, but it's the first one with the main character, and one of the earliest in the film, is the best fight scene in the film. And it happens about half an hour into a 3-hour-long film. Well, it's not 3 hours, it's 2 1/4, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it happens a quarter of the way in. It's not that the rest of the film is, like, downhill, it's just that it never reaches the same height. Which is kind of a shame, because, like, otherwise it's a good film. But that one fight scene is so much better than everything else that happens afterwards. I thought that Katie, the, like, main side character, the, like, lead female character, there's, like, 3 characters who, like, are together for the most of the film, but, like, she's the main other one. I thought she was going to get really annoying at first, and then she just didn't, which was nice. Like, I thought she was going to be a really annoying character, and she just wasn't. She was actually pretty good the entire way through. Like, I was never like, oh yeah, I'm happy to see her, but I was never like, she is detracted from the scene. At no point was anything that she did bad. It was, like, actually no, that's kind of a lie. It's not that it was bad. I feel a bit weird, because she basically learns how to be, like, a master archer in about 3 days, and that just seems a bit much to me. I realise this sounds like a weird criticism, considering it's a fucking Marvel film, and, like, basically everyone is magic. But archery's hard. That's it. Archery's just really fucking hard. Like, I like archery, and I'm really bad at it, because it's hard. And she goes from never having touched a bow to basically 3 days later saving the world with a bow. It's weird, because, like, I have absolutely no complaints about the fact that she basically saved the world. I'm literally only annoyed because I think archery's really hard. That's it. But no, she was good. And I'm like, it's a relationship that I feel like makes sense. And it didn't feel forced. And that's nice. Because half the time you get these, like, forced romances in films, and this didn't feel like a forced romance. Like, half the time it didn't feel like a romance, but it kind of is. And, like, you feel like it's going to. And maybe it doesn't, like, totally commit, but it kind of does. It commits enough. Like, it's good. Getting Tony back was pretty cool. To be clear, I don't mean Iron Man. Yeah, getting Tony back was cool. It was completely unexpected. And it was nice. And it was nice that he also stuck around for more than about 30 seconds. Like, I thought he was just going to be, like, a random one-off character you just meet somewhere, and it turns out that, no, he sticks around for the rest of the film. And he's very helpful. Also, Morris. Morris is a great character. I'm a big fan of Morris. I would like a Morris. I like that they work well together. It was nice that, like, Morris cares so much about Tony, and vice versa. I realise that a lot of what I'm saying is kind of vague. That's fully intentional. Like, sometimes I feel like I might be edging into spoiling stuff. I would assume at this point that if you cared about the Marvel stuff, you wouldn't have listened to any of this anyway. But I'm also trying to leave it so that, like, you get my general feelings without me outright spoiling stuff. The only other things that get me with the film is that the, like, big CGI monster thing at the very end, I feel like absolutely nothing for it. It didn't feel like a threat. I feel like I was told it was supposed to be a threat, but I didn't understand what it could do. And I don't mean, like, because they didn't explain it to me. I mean, like, it felt like the powers were simultaneously incredibly powerful, but also incredibly weak. Because they were like, oh, it's going to destroy the world, but they were also like, oh, but you can punch it to death. And it was like, okay, well, should I be worried about it? Should I not be worried about it? It just feels like I couldn't understand if it was a massive threat or not. Basically, I couldn't decide if its powers were, like, if it was, like, incredibly powerful or actually kind of weak. And it looked hideous, so it felt like it was supposed to be really powerful, but because it only gets, like, really set up about 10 minutes before you fight it, it didn't feel like very much. Like, there was no build-up to it. It was just, oh, this is what it actually is. Oh, here it is. Oh, it's dead. That was, like, kind of it. I think that's probably the worst part of the film, to be honest. Like, the end. There are some cool bits to it, but I think that is probably the worst part. Except for, like, the very few final scenes where they're, like, sat in a bar having a conversation. I liked that. It just seemed like a nice way to wrap it up. It was nice that it was, like, something they would do. And I really enjoyed that. I think it was a good film. It was definitely better than Black Widow. It isn't my favourite. I don't know what my favourite is anymore. I'm still a big fan of the original Iron Man. But that was mostly because that's really just the one that got me into all of it. Anyway, it was fine. I think if you're going to watch any of the things I just spoke about, I think WandaVision's probably best. Falcon and the Winter Soldier is probably going to be important coming up because I feel like it sets up more than WandaVision does. It sets up more characters. WandaVision is kind of important, but Falcon and the Winter Soldier sets up like 4 or 5 different characters. WandaVision essentially gives a power boost to one and sets up one. Loki feels like it sets up itself, but nothing really else. What If is completely irrelevant, to be honest. It's nice, but completely irrelevant. Black Widow sets up one new character again. And then Shang Chi is probably... I think WandaVision was the best thing to watch. I think Shang Chi is probably the more important one to watch, because it probably sets up more of where things are going to go. It gives you some idea of how the world is post everything as well. Especially more so than the other films. Other shows, rather. But yeah, they were all fine. The other thing I've spent my time doing over the last month is trying out a load of card games. So why card games, you might be wondering? And that's just because I like card games. I used to play a little bit of Pokemon when I was when I was younger. I also played some YuGiOh, but I didn't play it very well, and I didn't really understand it. Then I kind of fell off for a long time, and then a couple of years ago, my wife and I got into playing Magic, and we kind of like dip in and out of that now. So what we usually do is when we go to town, we sometimes go to our local game store and just buy a couple of booster packs and then take them home and play pack wars against each other with the Magic stuff from like newer sets than the last time we played. And that's like it. So we went to do that, and Magic's a fucking mess right now. There's just too much. There's too much. I don't understand where it all came from. Like, in terms of, like, release order, I don't understand where it is. It feels like a fucking mess. There's, like, simultaneously so much stuff and so little information that I find it really hard to, like, parse all of it. And it just really put me off. Like, what the fuck is the point in a set booster or a draft booster? I don't care, just give me the boosters. I know draft boosters are technically the same old boosters, but why have we got set boosters now? Why is that a different thing? I don't fucking care. Just give me the cards. I just want to play our game. Like, and they've all, like, raised in price. Like, so many times they've all raised in price, and I was just like, it's not worth it to me anymore. So, instead of that, what we did was we went around to a couple of places, and then ended up buying most of it online, to be honest, and chose a load of new card games, and just tried them all out. Before I get into them individually, I have, like, a couple of, like, overarching ideas, I suppose is the way I'd say it. One, please, stop making foil cards. Foil cards are always fucking awful. They're just always the worst part. Every single time I get a foil card, I'm disappointed. Because it's always terrible, because it's always fucking bent. Just stop making them. I don't want them. I just want normal cards. And the other thing is that a good set of instructions and, like, a good tutorial are, like, really important. And when you don't have them, it puts me off playing the game at all. Like, if you can't put the time in to give me even a sheet of paper explaining how to play the game, I'm going to care less. And I understand a lot of this is, like, they've, like, kind of moved to, like, giving you, like, website addresses to learn stuff. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't help me when I'm, like, sat at a table trying to play right now. Just give me even, like, a quick rules card. Just something. I don't expect you to explain every single card interaction. I don't expect, like, specific judge calls. I just want an overview of how to play, like, turn order, that sort of thing. That would be nice. Having to watch a load of videos before I played any card game to learn how to play was... I kind of liked it, but I don't feel like it's something I should have to do. So, Keyforge is weird. Keyforge is a game where you get given a completely randomly made deck and play with it, and that's, like, it. So what I mean by that is that there are no, like, boosters, there's no deck building. You just buy a deck and play with the deck, and that's, like, it. It was kind of nice. It's kind of a shame, though, because I really like deck building. That's, like, one of my favourite things to do in a card game. But this is fine. What I will say, though, is that Keyforge, to me, feels a lot more like a board game than a card game. It feels like you're playing a board game with cards. I find it hard to, like, explain the distinction, but I feel like if you play it, you'll understand what I mean. You get your deck. Your deck is split in 3 houses. You choose one house to play each turn. You can play as many of those cards as you want, and then use them. And it's all about playing your cards, and then using them to generate amber. You use the amber once you get enough of it to make a key, and the first person to make 3 keys wins. And, like I say, it feels kind of more like a board game. A lot of it is, like, making stuff, and there's a lot of, like, tokens and stuff that you're constantly messing with, and it feels like a board game. It feels like you need a hell of a lot of stuff. It feels like you would go to the store and buy a board game, and it would come with a set of cards and you play with it, like Monopoly does. It doesn't feel like a game where I'd go out and buy a deck and then play the deck, because you can't play the deck without all the rest of the stuff. Like, technically, yes, you can, but you need to use it yourself then. Like, you need this complete set to play the game properly. It's not that it's bad, it's just strange. I feel like advertising it as a card game isn't really true, it is just a game that uses cards. Like, again, like, I feel like this doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense, but if you play it, you will know what I mean. The other complaints I've got is that it's really fucking long. Like, the matches go on forever. I played 6 new card games, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. I played 5 new card games. And Keyforge is without doubt the longest one. It would regularly take 45 minutes to an hour, if not an hour and a half, to play one match. Especially because the way mine and my wife's decks were built. A lot of them were things like, you'd play a card and it'd make forging a key more expensive. Or you would play a card, it would halve both players' amber when you played it. Which meant you would go from, like, having enough to build a key to not, and needing at least 1, if not 2 more turns to get back to the same place. One of the things you do is you can tap a card and it gives you amber. I had a card that, when you played it, it meant that all cards, when tapped, instead of giving you amber, would give it to your opponent's creatures, and then you had to kill your opponent's creatures to get the amber back. And it slowed the game down so much. It was, like, really powerful because of it, and in some ways it was kind of more fun, because it meant you had to do more stuff. but it took fucking forever. There's nice things about it though, where it's like a lot of it is built off like doing combos on turns, so like setting up a combo over a long period, like over a couple of turns you would play a load of different cards to get you to the position you want to be in for your combo, and then one turn, just play your entire combo and generate a load of amber. And like, that was always fun. But it's fun, and I enjoy it, but it is probably one of the longest card games I've ever played. And if you're not into that, maybe you don't. Or maybe just be better at it than I am. The next card game we played after that was the Final Fantasy card game, and there isn't a whole lot to say about that. It was pretty easy to get into. It was a little bit strange because a lot of the cards have the same name. Like the deck that I got, there was at least 6, if not 9 cards in it that were all lightning. It's like in Magic, you get Liliana and you also get Liliana, but they're all different names. They're the same person, but they're all different named cards because they all do different things. And you can have like multiple of them, and you know just by looking at it from the name that it's a different thing. Whereas with the Final Fantasy game, even cards that do the same thing can be different. You will have a lightning, or a lightning without borders, or a lightning with like different colours, and they'll all be the same card, but they'll all look completely different. Or you'll also have a lightning that looks completely different and is a different card. And it was just weird. I'm not complaining about it, I just feel like it could be demonstrated in a better way. Like, just do something. I mean, I realise, yes, the art obviously makes it look different, but just give it a different name. It was very quick. Like, the games were over quite quickly. Some of that... So, we didn't spend a lot of time on any single one of these card games because we had so many we tried. So we can't have gotten too deep into it. So maybe some of my complaints that I've been making for each of these won't be that big if we know more, or maybe we'll come up with others. But for this one, it feels like the games were very quick. Like, we would get through them very quickly. The cards feel quite nice. They're kind of like plasticky, but even just after a couple of games, they were starting to fray on the edges on a few of them, which was kind of annoying. And again, they had some foil ones that were curling again. Other than that, though, I quite liked it. It's quite cheap as well, so it's probably worth getting just to try it, at least. It was like £10 for one of the 2-person starter decks, and we enjoyed that. So, yeah, it was worth trying. The next one we played was Flesh and Blood, and Flesh and Blood is incredibly complex and kind of annoying. There were so many times while playing where we would read things and not fully understand what it did, and not really understand where things are supposed to go when you're done. Like, you have a banished zone and a graveyard, which I realise it sounds like exile in your graveyard, which it kind of flows like, but cards would interact with them differently, and it wasn't always clear where a card was supposed to go, because you have your graveyard, your pitch, and your banished zone, and it's a very complex game, even just in terms of, like, the layout, before we even get to anything else. Before you start a match, you put out a hero, equip weapons to it, equip armor to it, and then start the card game. And it already starts off quite complex. And then you're like playing a card game, and you have to sacrifice cards from your hand, where they go into the pitch, and that lets you play new cards. And the cards sacrifice for different numbers, and cost different to play, like you would expect, but each card sacrifices for a different amount. But even cards with the same name can sacrifice for different amounts and do different things. And it's just like loads of little things like that. It's kind of annoying, especially in terms of like making quick decisions. If you have 3 cards with the same name, and I look at them, I want them to all do the same thing. But you can have 3 cards with the same name, which will sacrifice for 3 different amounts, and will do 3 different things. Like, one will do 1 damage, one will do 2, and one will do 3, even though they're all the same. It's just kind of annoying. Like, it's so complex. There's so much to do, and like I say, there were times where, because of it, like, we couldn't tell if we were doing things right, or if we were just doing things completely wrong. We kind of, like, muddled through it, but there's just a lot there, and this is also the game that came with the least information. There was, like, nothing in the box. There was just your deck, and nothing else. There was a nice picture, but we watched some videos on how to play, and it kind of helped, but there were still times when I just didn't understand, and, like, each deck essentially revolves around a specific mechanic, but because the deck doesn't really explain how to use that mechanic, I couldn't understand when I was doing things right or wrong with it. I feel like it could be fun, and we kind of enjoyed it, but I don't get the urge to go back to it all that much. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to do. And even every single just attack phase is weirdly complex. It's like kind of fun, but I don't know. It feels like it might be a bit much. The next one we played was the Digimon card game. And it was actually really fun. I quite enjoyed it. My only issue with it is that it's really hard to buy. Couldn't find any of it anywhere. I actually went to a shop to order some, and the first time I went they had it, so the second time I went back to get it, and it had gone. I don't know if this means it's very popular, or they didn't make very much, or both. But it was kind of frustrating, because it meant I couldn't get the deck I wanted, so I ended up with just 2 random decks they had. Some of the stuff about it is a little bit unclear, but nowhere near to the extent of like Flesh and Blood is. It was mostly fine. I feel like, trying to think now of a specific situation where I was confused, but I actually can't think of any, which means maybe it isn't as confusing as I'm saying it is. I enjoyed it. The way that playing cards work in it is way more interesting as well, where your cards can have like 2 costs on them. They have an evolution cost, and they have a play cost. So you can play them raw without evolving them, and that costs more but gets you a monster out straight away. Or you can play a card for its evolve cost, which means it has to go on a lower level creature, but it costs less to do. So you kind of want to do a little bit of both each time. The way it works is that, like, if it has 1 to evolve, you play it, and it evolves the other creature, and you move the memory counter 1 towards your opponent. So the way that works is that there is like a shared memory counter between you and your opponent, and it moves in like a snake pattern from one side to the other. So it goes all the way to 10 on one side and then to 10 on the other, and in the middle is 0. If it hits 0, when it's on your turn, it switches to your opponent's turn. If it goes past 0, it switches as well, but it gives your opponent that many extra, like, mana to play with. So it's really cool. So, like, you could force your opponent into a position where they had to play a big card for a lot of cost. Like, once I made my wife play a card that was, like, 7 or something, so she played it, and that gave me 5 to play with on the next turn. So I managed to get, like, 4 things done that turn, because I managed to play, like, a 2, and then a 1, and then a 1, and then I saved the last thing for, like, a massive 1, and play, like, another 7 back. So that gave her a load to play with next turn, but it set me up really well as well. It's just really cool, because it's, like, it's not just a back and forth in terms of, like, your board state, it's also a back and forth in terms of, like, me playing a card can actually benefit my opponent, because it gives them the ability to do more on their turn as well. It's like a really interesting way to play it. And we quite enjoyed it. My wife isn't a big fan of her deck because it has bugs in it, and she doesn't like bugs. But it was fun. Quite enjoyed it. There was some things about it that I don't completely understand. Like, you attack your opponent's security, which is basically just like, it's a set of cards that they have face down, and when you attack their security, they flip it, and either way it gets destroyed, but either it gets destroyed and you keep your creature, or your creature and it get destroyed. Either way. The only thing that confuses me is, it didn't actually say anywhere, which is why I'm a bit confused. When your opponent has Digimon out, do you have to attack the Digimon, or can you attack their security? And what is to stop you from just attacking the security every turn? Why would you not do that? If you can every turn, why does it matter? Just do that every turn. Just kill things. Like, you can have the game over by, like, turn 6 that way. I don't get why you wouldn't, really. There are little things like that where it's not really explained in the rules that we were given, so I couldn't really tell. But besides that, it was pretty fun. It was probably the second most fun we had, if not... It was either the second or third. Keyforge is probably the most fun we had. And then either Final Fantasy or this, or Digimon. That's probably the next one. And then Flesh and Blood. And then what I'm going to talk about next. But yeah, I would like to play more of the Digimon one. We probably will do. Also, one nice thing is that it comes with an extra booster as well. So it just gives you a couple of extra plods to play with, yes. Extra cards to play with and, like, mix into your deck next time, which was nice. I got a secret rare in mine. It was nice. It was cool. Like, I like it when it does that. Like, Pokemon used to do that as well. Don't know if it still does, because it's been a while since I've played any Pokemon. Pokemon's one of the ones which I actually, like, kind of know, so we didn't feel the need to explore that again, because we both know how to play that already, and this was all about trying new things. The last thing we did was YuGiOh. So, I said earlier that I played YuGiOh, And that was kind of a lie, because I basically just collected the cards, and then my friends and I pretended to play, because I don't think any of us really knew how to play. So we just sort of like put cards down and said we won. That was like basically it. Now, though, my wife and I have tried it, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. The cards are tiny. And we got them, and they were all bent, because a lot of them were foils. We got the Egyptian god decks, just because they came in a pair, so it made sense to get both of them and try against each other. I just don't like them. Like, I don't think it was all that fun. It was fine. Nothing amazing. It is easily the worst of the ones we tried in this section. Like, of the 5 games we tried this month, it is the one we disliked the most, and the one that we enjoyed the least. The cards are really fucking small, and they have a shit ton of text on them, and it just makes it really hard to read. It's just uncomfortable the entire time. They also, like, the wording on the cards is incredibly unclear, so there was a lot of times when we'd read things and not really understand what was going on, especially because, like, my wife and I both have difficulty reading things, like, even just normally, and this is so small, it's hard to just keep track of where you're up to when you're reading it. So, like, my eyes, like, skip around a lot when I'm reading stuff. It's one of the reasons why with my notes and stuff, I color code stuff, and I also, like, keep everything on a separate line, because it just keeps me, like, focused on the bit that I'm trying to talk about at any one time. And with this, it's like a load of tiny text in a tiny little box, and it's really hard to read, and it is not incredibly clear, and it was just a bad time. I just didn't enjoy it, to be honest. We played a couple of games of this, and I just didn't really enjoy it at all. I don't think there are any games we played less than 2 games of, but this is probably the one we enjoyed the least and would play the least, and I'll probably go back to it for the sake of having spent money on it, but I don't really care. Of the 5 games I played this month, the clear ranking is Keyforge. Then Digimon and Final Fantasy probably share a place. Kind of, I think it's easier to get into Digimon. I think we'll probably play more of that just because both of us like Digimon, whereas only really I like Final Fantasy. Although my wife likes the Carbuncle. She also likes the Lalafell though, and that's kind of depressing. And then Flesh and Blood was okay, but probably too complex for us. And then YuGiOh is clearly the one we enjoyed the least. If I was going to recommend any of them to actually play though, probably either Final Fantasy or Digimon, because Final Fantasy is very quick and quite easy to get into, and Digimon is also, it's a little bit more complex and takes a little bit longer, but it's fun once you get into it, and it's got loads of shit. There's like a load of shit to it. The only issue I've got with that is that it's kind of hard to get a hold of. So, the only reason I wouldn't say to get Keyforge is because, like I said, it feels a lot more like a board game than a card game, and if you want a card game, go for one of the card games. If you want a good game, go for Keyforge, because Keyforge is probably the best of the games. You get what I'm saying, I would hope. We are planning to get more Keyforge. We have spoken about getting more Keyforge. My wife has spoken about getting more Digimon decks. We haven't spoken about getting more of anything else. So, that'll probably give you some idea of what we're thinking about. The only other thing we bought playmats. Just because they were cheap, and it's nice to finally have some proper playmats. With the amount of card games that we play and have played over the past, decade, it's nice to finally have something, proper to play on. And mine's a nice, just, dark red. It just looks really nice. I'm glad that I finally got something. I hope I haven't, rushed through all this too much, but we're now almost 57 minutes in, and I've finished all my topics except for the last 2, which are just the channel updates and the outro. So that went well for me. I don't know. Maybe I could have spent more time on stuff. I don't know. Most people don't listen this far anyway, so guess it doesn't matter. But I don't know. I liked doing it this way, but maybe I could have spent more time on some of the topics and less on others, but then it's more work for me to do later on as well, so yeah. Either way, it'll be fine. Right, so, channel update. Since the last podcast, I've finished Heavensward, and this week, I've started Stormblood. I also bought the Collector's Edition upgrades and pre-ordered Endwalker. So, there are 8 weeks, I think? 9 weeks? Just give me a sec, I will actually count. 8, 9, 10-ish weeks until Endwalker comes out. I'm not going to be ready for when Endwalker comes out. I already know that. At best, I think Stormblood will take me 6 weeks. And then Shadowbringers, again, if it takes me the same amount of time, that's another 6 weeks. So that'll take me 2 weeks into 2 weeks after Endwalker's release. And that'll take me to the start of December. But that does mean I might have finished the game by the end of January. So that'll be fun. I don't know what I'm going to do then, to be honest. I've spent so much time doing this, that I don't know what I'm going to do when it's done. Speaking of being done, though, Monster Hunter isn't. There you go. Monster Hunter's going to carry on. It's fine. I'm still recording stuff. I can't remember where I'm up to. I'm actually getting quite near the end now. Partway through the 7-star quests, I think. And then I've got the 8-star to do. Yeah. And then I think after I've done all the 8-star, I might do all the event stuff. And then I've got to decide about whether or not I actually want to do the challenge stuff. I don't know how much I care. I don't really know how much I care about the event stuff. I might not do the event and challenge stuff as part of the LP. Maybe I'll just do all of the low rank and high rank stuff, all the village and hub quests, and leave the extra stuff just for me to do. I don't know. I've not decided yet, but I expect that to be done by the end of the year. I don't see why it would take me much longer. Other than that, I started and finished another LP. So I did Finding Paradise. It's finished yesterday, as of when this came out. I like Finding Paradise. It was really good. I did it partially because Imposter Factory comes out in 4 days from when this podcast goes up? Which just happened to be complete chance, really. I was already considering doing this, and then they just put out a tweet saying that was coming out soon, and I was like, guess now I should do it then. What this does mean, though, is that I need another LP. I already know what it's going to be. My patrons already know what it's going to be. Usually I would take a 1-week break after Finding Paradise, which I'm mostly going to do. Except, instead of taking a full week, I'm just going to take until the 1st, which is the Friday, just because I figured it'd be nice to start the next LP on the start of the month. So my new LP will be starting on the 1st of October. Well, technically it's already started, but you don't know that. Besides that, everything else is going to carry on as normal. We've got more sentences coming, as always. I would like to do more things, but I just never know what to do. Doesn't help that I'm, constantly tired. Seems like the only time I'm not tired anymore is when I'm, drinking a load of Coke or something. If I'm drinking a coffee, I'm okay. If I'm drinking Coke, I'm okay. If I'm not doing one of those two things, I am absolutely fucking shattered all the time. Anyway, I think the only other thing to do is my outro. So, special thanks to all of my patrons. You can join them over at patreon.com/Holden Gatsby, and for $1 a month you'll get to see what I'm working on early and get exclusive roles in my Discord, along with other rewards I might think of. You can also just follow me there if you want to for free, as it's probably the best place to see all of my content as soon as it's available. There's links to the Patreon, along with my Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and all of the other podcast platforms in the description for this episode. Finally, don't forget you can email me using podencastby@gmail.com if you've got anything you want to say. Thanks for sticking around. Bye. Special thanks to my patrons, Justin Wood, Hobbs, Koopy Vegeta, Gunrunner, Water, and Bat. You can join my patrons at patreon.com/Holden Gatsby, follow me on Twitter @Holden Gatsby, and follow my Twitch at twitch.tv/Holden Gatsby. Don't forget to subscribe to both of my channels. Thanks for watching. Bye.